This is Continuum Drag, a weekly podcast where we watch sci-fi, fantasy, and everything in between.
This week, Project U.F.O, Season 1, Episodes 7 and 8.
Sir, is it possible that we might be the first to find out what we've all been looking for? Positive physical evidence?
You want to know the truth?
Yes, sir.
I don't know.
Welcome to Continuum Drag, the podcast that knows better than to believe some no-good teens. I'm Luke, here with my co-host Jordan. What's real, Jordan?
Time to take out Atmos at the interplanetary exchange. Hold on. Time to take out Atmos at the interplanetary exchange. There you go.
You still can't say it.
Time to take out Atmos at the interplanetary exchange. Better? Every time?
I think I would have said interplanetary, but
Yeah, what did I say? Interplanetary. What did I
thought
say?
you were saying interplanetary.
Interplanetary. No, time to take out Atmos, which is, as we'll find out in Alien Currency, at the interplanetary exchange, which is like just an exchange bank on like Mars or something.
Maybe it's the Zoom that's giving it to me, but you sound like a Venetian when you try to say it.
Oh, like one of those people? Interplanetary.
Well, Jordan, we're back with more Project U.F.O.
We're back. We're excited.
And
I'm excited. I got a tea in my hand.
And I thought before we got started, we would talk a little bit about the people who created Project U.F.O.
Exciting.
Have you looked into them at all?
Not really. Well, I originally when we first started, I looked up the showrunner and was like, I don't think I've recognized anything that he's made.
Well, it was created by Jack Webb and Harold Jack Bloom. Mm-hmm. And Jack Webb is someone I thought you might know, because this feels like a show that you would have watched as a child. But he was the star and creator of the influential police procedural Dragnet.
Oh, Dragnet. You know, I never actually did watch Dragnet, only because I think it wasn't really in like a really active syndication when I was a kid. But I know of Dragnet.
Well, he apparently was quite the prolific creator. He had quite a few shows that he created and like worked on via his company post Dragnet. And this actually was the second last one he would do before his death into the early 80s.
What else did he do?
I don't have any of that here. Dragnet's the only one that matters.
Dragnet's the big one. I mean, you already got Dragnet, and you have Project U.F.O. He also did Planet UFO.
I think there was a show called The DA. There's a lot of cop shows, basically, and a few medical ones. I think the one was called Emergency! !
I like that. I like the exclamation mark.
And the co-creator of it, Harold Jack Bloom, was a real classic TV journeyman writer. Did a lot of TV writing. Seemed to have worked with Jack Webb's company a lot. Actually, they seem to have done a bunch of shows together. So I think they were probably pretty tight business-wise. But one thing of note, though, is he was nominated for an Oscar for the screenplay for the 1953 film The Naked Spur.
Well, obviously a Western. I'm not familiar with it, though.
Oh, I think you might enjoy it. I looked at it and it looked like it would be right up your alley.
Who stars in it? Gregory Peck. I don't know.
I think it is Gregory Peck.
Oh, what a guess if that was true.
Honestly, I was trying to think of the name, and I was like, who was it? It was someone big. But
no, it's probably
remembering.
It's probably what's his face? James. My brain's freezing.
Jordan. It was Jimmy Stewart and Janet Leigh.
Jimmy Stewart. That'd be my second guess. Yeah,
that's what I thought originally it was, but I couldn't remember his name.
Yeah, Jimmy Stewart. He did a lot of Westerns.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that must be nominated for an Oscar. It must be a pretty good movie.
Well, not must be, but I bet you it was all right.
Probably
there's a lot of movies that
better than most of that year.
Yeah, better than most. Yeah.
Anyway, some other notable writers and directors that were on the show. I just went through sort of the list of people who had worked on the show, and it wasn't a lot of notability, obviously, but there's a few people here. Some of them just to us, like Dennis Donnelly, who directed an episode of Super Train, A Very Formal Heist.
Look there. Oh, A Very Formal Heist. Yeah.
We didn't watch that one, but if someone wants to donate to charity, we will.
I bet it had someone from MASH in it.
Oh, almost definitely. I think that might be the one that maybe Klinger's in.
Oh, nice. Yeah, let's watch that.
Just give $50 to one of the charities, everybody.
And we get to watch Klinger on a train.
There's Sigmund Newfield Jr., who directed 2 episodes of Galactica 1980.
Okay, yeah. I do like that these all shows sort of like just start blending to each other. You know, it's like the same people just work on all these shows.
Yeah, he did The Night the Cylon Landed.
Oh, is that near the end?
Yeah.
Or is that the one where they go to the party with the meatballs?
That's the one with the meatball party.
Right, yeah.
And, of course, Super Scouts Part 2.
Oh, of course. Oh, who could forget?
There was a writer named George F. Slavin who he directed he wrote an original Star Trek episode, The Mark of Gideon.
I don't remember which one that was.
Me neither.
Yeah, my original Star Trek knowledge isn't what it once was.
Well, what about this guy, Larry Alexander, who wrote the Super Train episode Superstar?
Was that the one with the woman who was actually a princess and the guy fell in love with her? Is that one?
No, it was the one about the producer who had the mob after him because he owed them money, so he had to go talk to his ex-wife to star in his movie.
Oh, that show wasn't very good.
And the last notable writer was Robert C. Dennis, who wrote 4 episodes of the 60s Batman show.
Oh, that must have really hurt.
You think it hurt?
Well, you got to come up with those puns and things all the time.
That seems like it'd be a treat.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I'd have worked on Batman.
You could think of some bad gadgets, couldn't you?
Yeah, of course. Why not? I mean, once they went like shark repellent, you can do anything.
You can only think of gritty Batman ideas.
That's right.
All right. Well, that's it. That's all the little tidbits I have on the creators of the show.
You know what? It sets the stage. Everyone's feeling it. They're dimming their lights, turning the volume up. And it's time to talk about episode 7, Sighting of the Forest City Incident.
Here's the IMDb summary for season 1, episode 7, Sighting 4007, the Forest City Incident.
Sighting 4007?
Yeah, they all start with sightings.
Oh, yeah. I just said, all mine said was Sighting the Forest City Incident. I realized there was numbers in there, too. This is the 4,000th sighting they've seen?
4,007th.
Wow.
For some reason, the series starts at number 4,000 and just keeps going up incrementally from there.
They were just getting their legs the first 4,000.
There'll be a prequel with those original 4,000. All right, here's the summary, Jordan. A group of teenagers believe they saw a UFO while they are parking in the wilderness.
Yeah, okay, that tells you almost nothing, but it tells you what the opening scene is.
Yeah, I mean, as per usual, we get a cold open, couple UFO encounters. One is that a guy has another classic fire in the sky encounter where a bright light flies over his car and it shakes it.
Yeah, and his sort of like, he sort of has it like Jurassic Parks his coffee a little bit, and it makes a lot of noise though. Not the coffee, the UFO seems to make a lot of noise.
Yeah, they're noisy. These UFOs are pretty noisy.
Yeah, agreed.
And the other encounter is with some teens who have gone to Makeout Point and happen to see a UFO landing. I believe they describe it as an upside-down teacup and saucer.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me ask you this. They're going all to, like, make out, but there's 2 different couples. Have you ever been in a car with another couple to go make out?
Yeah, you don't have your own car, so you got to go make out in the backseat of your friend's car.
Yeah, I've never had that.
Still time.
Still time? I guess that's true. There's still time. I think I'd rather just be in my own car. I need the room,
Fair enough.
Just stretch out.
You want to stretch out?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you need arm movement, Hey, here are a couple of things I want to say. One, I love that the teens all look like they're about 35 years old. And they probably actually are around teenager age. It's just because we're looking back in the 70s and everyone just looks older. But in the next scene, we're going to have our 2 leads. What are their names? It's Jake and Harry. They're going to show up to sort of add an Air Force to start this investigation. And it has my favorite line in this because it's so unnecessary. I know why it's in there, but they basically show up and they meet this guy who's like running the base or the representative of the base. And he's like, hey guys. And they're like, hi. And he's like, hey, do you want to go to lunch? And they're like, it's much too early for lunch. And then they're like, they go on, and I just couldn't stop laughing at how dumb it was that they had to even mention this because it had no point. But I realized later on it's because they're going to have lunch with the kids, and it felt like it was a thing where, like, if we don't mention at the beginning that they don't want lunch with this guy because it's too early, people are not going to understand why they're having lunch later. But it just seemed like such a nonsense line, and I really enjoyed it. So that's 1 point. 1 point for the episode.
You're already off to a good start here.
Yeah.
Yes, Project Blue Book arrives on the scene here, and I found this town to be very funny. Literally every single adult in the town hates teens. They think they're liars. They think they're always pulling pranks all day long.
Teens, they're troublemakers.
I had one question. The principal mentions a prank in which the students somehow disassembled and reassembled the principal's car in the second floor laboratory. How does that work?
Well, I mean, that's a classic prank. People have done it. I remember people did it at my high school too. Take apart a car and reassemble it.
How could you do that? I don't understand.
If you know enough about automotive and stuff and how to take apart and you have the tools, like we had our school, we had like an automotive part. So they probably had all the proper tools. So you took out some of the major bolts enough that you could, carry the main parts back and then just put back on all the doors and everything.
Man, it was crazy back in 50s high school, huh?
Yeah. I had my big Letterman jacket on,
Yeah, your hair was all swooped back.
Obviously. I was a punk kid you couldn't trust.
And back to the show, everybody.
We'll get through it.
Project Blue Book, however, all the adults are they're lying clearly, they're teens, and they're just well, we're impartial investigators, we're going to find out what's really happening. And they get the teens, they get a whole flashback explaining what happened, which we won't get back into. It's just UFO landed, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it's like they see the UFO, the guys go off themselves to see a little bit more. They see the UFO, they sort of make a little bit of noise, the UFO flashes a light on them, and that's basically, and then it flies away. That's basically all that they see.
Yeah, and then Project Blue Book takes them back to find evidence at the landing site, and they use the my favorite gadget in this, the pentrometer. They whip out the pentrometer, Jordan.
Is that what it was called?
Yeah.
Pentrometer.
Which apparently they just push into the ground, and it tells them how heavy an object was that made a dent in the ground.
You know what? I like those things. They're a real time saver, so why not? Sure. Pentrometer.
Yeah. The UFO weighed 26,000 pounds, Jordan.
Yeah, it was a lot.
They also find primitive glass underneath a spot where the heat from the UFO may have been blasting down on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the theory being that the heat was at such a high temperature that it made the sand below into glass. That was a theory, right?
Yes, that's right. And then old Harry Fitz, our down south staff sergeant, he's and look at this, Captain Gatlin. There's a stick on the ground from a sassafras tree. It broke in half perfectly. Yeah.
They're like the sassafras tree. They're everyone knows that it's hard to break them cleanly. They'd bend, I suppose. And it was one of those weird things. I was like, this seems very specific, a bit of knowledge for people that these branches wouldn't normally snap cleanly,
My favorite part is about halfway through the episode. They get some reports back to the lab, and Harry Fitz is like, "Oh no, I was wrong. It was a pecan tree."
I didn't even remember that.
Yeah, he was so upset. It was actually a pecan tree. I'm like, what does this matter?
He didn't want to blow it. He you know why? Because he was bragging about all his tree knowledge, and then he was shown his comeuppance,
A local reporter also drops by to bring them photos of a UFO that a local man has brought to the newspaper, hoping that they'll purchase and send it on the wire. And they obviously want to go talk to this man, so they head out there. And the photographer's suspicious about the government and kind of wondering why they want his photos, and he's worried they're going to suppress the evidence. But with very little, talking into, he does hand over all the negatives to Project Blue Book.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and should we say now, I don't know if it really matters, but throughout the whole episode, they keep cutting to these two guys, and I wrote hobos, and it ends up they kind of are sort of you can't say hobos, I guess. They sort of squat in different places in the park and stuff, these two older guys, and you just keep seeing them in the background, sort of looking, I think, sort of mysterious, they're important in some way.
They're always sharing glances in the deep background, being like, oh.
That's right. Yeah, there's a lot of them looking, and they're looking at each other, being like, we know something. I'm like, all right, get to it.
They won't.
They won't to the very end.
But this photographer obviously is I can prove the story these teens had because I took these photos of the UFO on the night. And we'll skip forward a few scenes to conclude his story. But they send them off to the lab, and then midway through the show, they end up coming back to this photographer with a report on the photos they got from their lab. And they're like, well, we use some special military technology to lighten the contrast on your photos. Okay.
Yeah.
And what they find is the man actually hung a jar lid from a string outside of his home and just took photos of the jar lid to fake a UFO in the sky. And he's the man who was like menaced at the beginning, shook in his truck. But I guess what we're supposed to know is like all of his storyline has been a lie.
Yeah, well, I don't even think it's that. I thought, and maybe we saw it differently. I thought it's that he saw something, didn't get the evidence, so he faked his own evidence because to prove what he had seen. But I didn't understand. He seemed to like arrogant is maybe not the word. He was like somewhat aggressive when they were like, "We want to see your photos and stuff. You take my photos," and then like, "We want the negatives." He's like, "Yeah, you could take those too." And there wasn't really that much of a hesitation. Like, he must have known they'd find these doctored photos, right?
I don't know. It was all very strange. And I wasn't sure. Yeah, I wasn't sure whether to believe all his story or none of it. I didn't know if we were supposed to be going with it. And even when Project Blue Book presses him, they're like, well, why did you do it? Why did you fake these photos? And he gives his monologue about he did it because he loves kids.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he's like, I just like love kids and like no one trusts kids. And so like I wanted to like prove it for them or something. I was like, what? That's his motivation?
Yeah, I know. It was wild. I'm like, this town hates kids except for me. I love them. I love them so much. I have fake evidence.
Yeah. So now let me ask you this real quick before we get back to the plot. I don't know if this is a slightly different. Total shift is maybe not the way to say it, but the structure of the episodes seem to be at this point in the show. You see a UFO as the viewer. You believe people because you're seeing the exact evidence they're seeing. Then the episode sort of like breaks it down to sort of prove that the UFOs maybe didn't happen, but we never actually see evidence of it not happening. We see evidence that sort of at least gives some sort of adds evidence that maybe it didn't happen. And then usually the episode's like, well, it's inconclusive. And is that simply because they're trying to like toe the line of like, well, these official Project Blue Book episodes Project Blue Book sort of sightings never really found anything. And so they don't want to ever like say, yes, these UFOs happen. Because it seems like a weird thing. Like it's the opposite of what you think. You think something was happen. They prove it did happen. And then through a series of events, they can't, like that sort of X-Files thing. It gets like filed away, but because of some sort of secret, government thing, we can't get that truth. But this is more like they're proving it never happened, even though we see it did happen. Does that make sense? It's a long way of saying that.
Yeah, I think the premise of the show is that you're either going to end up on they're never going to prove alien life because that's not what happened with Project Blue Book. But you'll either get an unknown, or as they call it, a true unknown, or you'll prove someone was a liar or crazy or something.
Right. But it's weird because even in this, someone like this guy, this photographer, we see him seeing a UFO, but then we see that he faked evidence. So you're like, well, what am I seeing here?
I think you're supposed to think that earlier thing is just the lies he told later.
Okay.
Whereas the teens maybe have a true encounter.
Right, but you can't tell as a viewer the difference because there's nothing to separate those two flashbacks.
That's true. All you get is that this man faked it and eventually says he faked all his photos. And so I guess maybe you're supposed to assume he's a liar. Always a liar.
Right. All right, well, there we are.
Anyway, Jordan, back to the lying teens.
Yeah.
The mayor is putting a lot of pressure on the local police department to make some arrests, some teenage arrests.
I didn't understand this at all. Like, we're going to go to, like, court and stuff.
Yeah, the mayor wants someone punished for all these teen pranks, and we like hard cut to these teens getting like read the riot act by a judge and getting handed down a sentence for their like lying about seeing a UFO, which I believe their sentence was 4 weeks of cleanup work and a $15 fine.
Yeah, and that was funny because the oddness aside of them going to court for, let's be clear, they haven't done a prank. All they've done is said they saw something. That's not a prank. And that hasn't hurt anybody or put anyone out in any way other than literally the few minutes it took to listen to their story. So how you can get fined even something as little as $15 is beyond me in this sort of like a footloose town they live in here.
Well, but, there's not even lawyers. They don't even have lawyers. There's a real kangaroo court these teens have wandered into.
It's the same sort of court like last episode where the father-in-law just comes in the jury and just makes a big speech. It's the same sort of court. But yeah, so it's funny because the fine is also so low. Like even in $1979, $15 is not that much. So, but I like that. So basically, they get like read the riot act. They're like, you guys are really wasting everyone's time. We're tired of you teens. And then one of the guys, I guess, is it Jake?
Gatlin, Major Gatlin?
Yeah,
Gatlin?
Jake. He comes up and he's basically like, let me make a statement. I want to let me kind of disprove that they've done anything wrong. Give me 48 hours. Give me 48 hours and I'll prove something. And the judge is like, yeah, I'll allow it.
Sure, why not?
Yeah, he's like, this is not a real court anyway, so yeah, 48 hours, sure.
I like that he gets that 48 hours, and as the Project Blue Book boys like leave the courtroom, the local high school science club stops them and says, hey, can we volunteer to help you investigate the sightings? And they're like, what? No, you're teenagers. What are you talking about? And they're like, oh, okay. I was like, also like, what is happening?
I love those scenes, and I don't know if it's just because they need it to be a certain length of the episode, but it's the same thing with like the lunch conversation. I'm like, why is this in the show?
They want to show that the teens believe the other teens.
And the teens believe them, yeah.
Anyway, a few scenes go by where like the reports from the lab start rolling in about their earlier stuff, and most of the evidence they got is pretty inconclusive. I think one point they're just like, we found out there used to be a glass factory on that spot, so maybe that's why there was glass on the ground. I was like, okay.
Yeah, it's like they basically go through, and it's not so much that they prove it's a hoax, but they give enough they sort of find enough evidence to make things ambiguous.
Yeah, and to your point, after like going through all the evidence and finding out that it's like we can't prove anything really happened because there's enough evidence that disproves UFOs, they do finally give a presentation at the school to exonerate the teens, and their exoneration is like, well, we can prove they didn't fake it, but we can't prove anything really happened. So I guess we're filing this under unknown by everybody.
Yeah, it's this thing the show does that I don't know another way around it, but there's something very unsatisfying how these shows are structured, and I find always by the end of the episode, I as a viewer, and maybe it's looking at it with a modern eyes, I'm always just like, well, that was a huge waste of my time.
I think what would make a difference potentially is they should have some episodes where they catch some fakers. Like that's the episode. They prove someone is lying.
Well, one or the other. There should be some sort of something should be conclusive, even if the rest of the people don't know. They're basically like, we see aliens, we've had contact, but no one believes them. Or you're right, they go through something that seems airtight, and they sort of, systematically break it apart and see that it was a hoax. Those are both interesting episodes, but they keep landing somewhere in the middle where you see stuff and they go, yeah, remember what you saw? That didn't really happen. Or did it? Anyways, stay tuned for Mannix.
I mean, I think the unknowns would work better if you had like more proof of like other episodes where they proved it was wrong.
Yeah, but I should say this episode's not done because we finally go to the hobos.
Yes. As Project Blue Book pulls out of town, those old guys who've been lurking in the background, they finally zoom in on them, and they just have a conversation in a flashback, these two randos.
Yeah, they're like, well, they're gone, finally. And they basically, what it was they saw exactly what the teens did. They were there, camped out. They even imply, and let me know if I'm wrong, Luke, one of them throws like a beer bottle, and it breaks on the rocks. And I think they're implying that the glass they found is the hobo's glass.
I believe that is true.
And so I was like, they couldn't tell the difference in glass that had been formed by heat in sand and a broken beer bottle. Is that what I'm supposed to believe? That's less likely than aliens.
Well, you have to also understand that when Project Blue Book originally toured the site of the landing, at some point they look over and they see a campsite in the exact spot, and they're like, huh, a campsite. Well, let's not look any further into that.
I don't even remember that. It's just such a weird button to put on this episode to be like, hey, I know it's inconclusive. By the way, they did see everything. Anyway.
Well, I mean, as they say, they're self-described quote-unquote rummies, and they're like, who'd ever believe us? And, quote, what's to gain?
Yeah. And that's it. And that's it. That's the episode. It's very weird. It's an odd structure to a show. It's hard to articulate how you would think it would be almost more procedural, but the show's really not. Like, it's not so much an investigation. They talk to people and stuff, but you don't see them doing any hard investigating other than having a few conversations that sort of illuminate things, but never illuminate anything into a concrete solution or answer to stuff. So it's just such a bizarre way to watch these guys. Like, they might as well just be out, like, having chats.
Have you ever watched Unsolved Mysteries, Jordan?
Yeah, I have.
I feel the same way about that show in that, like, I'll watch an entire episode of it, and at the end of it, they're like, and we never solved it. And I was just like, why did I watch this again?
Yeah, there is a similar sort of feeling, you're right, of this, we're going to tell you about something.
It's really interesting.
What you think about it.
There's no ending.
Yeah, exactly. There's no ending. Which brings us to episode 8. What did you say? This is called, I have the Desert Springs incident. And it's what, investigation what?
This is the IMDb summary for episode 8, season 1, episode 8.
Yeah.
Citing 4008, the Desert Spring incident.
4008. Yeah, we're 2 episodes in a row. Episode 7 and 8. We're still in order.
There are a couple of questions we'd like to ask you.
We were curious about the propulsion system of your vehicle.
Interstellar ramjet.
How long would the trip take?
About 4 months, Earth time.
Really? Well, if you're using a ramjet propulsion system, you'd be able to travel at near the speed of light, wouldn't you? The trip should take less than 2 days.
We must leave now. Remember, we warned you about maintaining total secrecy.
Major Gatlin and Staff Sergeant Fitz encounter a woman who was visited by 2 men from Venus who say they can reunite her with her long-lost husband for $40,000. Later, they investigate a more credible sighting in the mountains of California.
That's right. Now, we're going to go through this, obviously, piece by piece, but I have to ask you something. And maybe I've missed this because on these shows, when they start getting a little draggy, my attention starts waning. We're going to meet, let's say they're aliens. We're going to meet aliens at this point. Let's just for the sake of this conversation. Does this show ever explain who these dudes are and why they're doing this?
Yeah, didn't they?
I don't think they did.
Well, we'll get into it.
The last scene was them being like, "Ooh," but that's it.
Well, we start off with 2 UFO encounters, per usual in the cold open.
Yeah, woman and walking her dog.
Yeah, an older woman walking her dogs at night. A big cigar-shaped UFO comes down.
I wrote the exact same thing. It looked just like a cigar. And I've said this before. I do really like that every single episode of this show, the people and the art team working on this went to the trouble of designing a very different looking UFO. I'm assuming because these are based on real cases, they've the person who has seen these things has described it in a different way. So instead of doing your classic flying saucer, every episode they look a little different. I like that. It makes for it just there's something a little more interesting about it.
Yeah, and the cigar comes down and it boils the lake she's walking by.
That's right. And they don't explain why. I don't know if it was supposed to be sucking in water or it's just doing some sort of experiment. But yeah, like flies down and like sort of goes into the water and boils it.
It shoots a little laser down that looks like a straw, and then it seems to suck the water up for a second and starts blowing it back in and making bubbles for fun.
Yeah, why not? Aliens.
And then the other encounter in the cold open is a UFO encounter at a bar on the top of the Matterhorn.
And it's like a ski lodge, right? At first I thought it was kind of a bar, but it's sort of like a chalet at a ski lodge, right?
Yeah, apparently you can take a gondola up to the top of the Matterhorn, and there's a restaurant and a bar up there in which you can spend your evening. And as we'll come to learn, a screenwriter, his agent, and the 2 assistants who work for the agent, who, like, they're being sexually harassed at the office, right? Those 2.
Yeah, that's right.
It's very weird, this relationships that's happening in this. But they've gone up there. They've been driving back from somewhere else, and they're like, hey, we've never been to the top of the Matterhorn. Let's all go up there for dinner. And then once they had dinner, they're like, let's all stay up here and get absolutely wasted drunk before we drive home. And they're like, great, sounds like a great idea.
It's a different time, Luke. It's the 70s. Don't worry about it.
They're closing out the bar when a UFO, completely different than the cigar one, this one is literally equipped with skis, so it's designed for landing on a mountain.
Yeah, it almost looks like a water plane. What do you call those? Like it has those.
Yeah,
it has those. Yeah, exactly. That's what it sort of looks like. It was weird. I'm like, we're seeing 2 different UFOs in one episode?
Yeah. And
mind blown.
And it lands on top of the bar, starts melting all the snow off the roof. Windows are breaking. Things are going crazy. The screenwriter, the agent, and the women, they run. They get on the gondola. The UFO, like, menaces them all the way down on the gondola. It's a terrible night for them. All of which, of course, this is going to bring Project Blue Book to Los Angeles again.
Yeah. Well, that's the main place. Also, probably where they're filming, so it's just easier.
Yeah, they got to go to L.A. was where we're shooting. And this time they fly to LA. They just climb into a combat jet and just like fly across the country in it. You can just do that in the Air Force.
I guess so. Yeah. Well, they had the footage. They had the B-roll, so that's how they're gonna travel. It's a lot of like dialogue over top of them flying.
And their first stop's going to be the woman with the dogs who saw the cigar. Her story was apparently published in the newspaper a few weeks ago. And so they're going to go talk to her. And when they arrive, she offers them fresh-made cinnamon buns, and they say no. And I was like, I can't believe these people.
You would say yes, please, 2 for me.
If someone came in and was like, I just baked cinnamon buns, you want one? I'd be like, absolutely.
Yeah, see, I'd say no because it's a weird. I always say no even when I want something.
You just are always depriving yourself.
Yeah, I'm just like, no, thank you. I don't like cinnamon. Then I'd be like, ugh, I wish I had that cinnamon bun.
You're like when your army sergeant comes to you and says, you want to go get lunch? You're like, it's too early for lunch. And then you go have lunch with teens.
That's exactly right. Oh, I wish I was having lunch with teens. You're telling me about hacky sacks and skateboards.
You're like, you kids still into devil sticks these days?
Yeah, you guys into devil sticks? Yeah, what else? I don't know, spinning plates, whatever they're into.
Anyway, this older woman, she tells them that 2 weeks after she saw the UFO and their story was published in the paper, some aliens from Venus came to her house by the name of Gist and Malin.
Yeah. And it's... yeah, and I like that they're basically like... She tells the story like, all this stuff happens. The cigar thing came and boiled the water. And then they come and she's like, well, don't worry. Like, they're coming back. Like, they just like... They made their introduction. They're coming back. And they're like, I guess we'll just wait for these guys, these Venetians. And she's like, yeah, cool.
There's an explanation here. Did you notice who played one of the Venetians, though?
No, who was it?
It was Angus Scrim, who probably most famous for playing the Thin Man in the Phantasm series.
Oh, I didn't recognize him.
I did immediately. I was like, who's this weird old man? I'm like, yeah. Anyway, in her flashback, these 2 men showed up at her house. They're very much dressed like the Men in Black, but they talk in a robotic manner. That's how you know
but
they're
they
aliens.
Also have they're dressed like the Men in Black, but then they also have like a gold medallion hanging over their neck, both of them.
Well, it's just the 70s.
Yeah. I don't think it is. I think it's supposed to be like sort of like a little bit odd and like, yeah, and different. So you're like, oh, that's not how you don't really wear a medallion, but maybe I'm wrong.
The Venetians say they saw her that night from the cigar and they tried to communicate with her. Now they're back because they want to offer her the chance to come live on Venus because that is where her husband, who's been missing for years, is, and she can be reunited with him.
Yeah, this was sort of sad, right? Like, they sort of imply that... Are they saying her husband died and she's getting a chance to see him again? Or is it that he just, like, left one day?
Well, later she'll explain to Project Blue Book that many years ago, her husband went out to get cigars and never came home.
Right. Yes, that's very sad. It's sad that if these people are taking advantage of this poor woman for her money, and they're also using her horrible trauma in her own history against her. But I mean, I guess that's what happens when you're a scammer.
Well, and these Venetians say, in order to get her to Venus, they're going to need $40,000 for expenses. It's very expensive to get you to Venus.
Well, it's not even that. They're basically like, we need a bunch of money. And she's like, well, I have $40,000 sitting in my account. And they're like, great, that will work. That's enough.
Yeah, they say there's expenses. And she's like, I have $40,000. I'm like, that'll cover it. And as you mentioned earlier, they also say if there's any money left over, she can exchange them into Atmos at the Interplanetary Exchange.
And did you see what the exchange is for him?
So funny. She tells Project Blue Book, she's like, the Atmos is worth so much more than the US dollar. And then she tells them the exchange rate.
It's 100 to 1.
Yeah, it's 100 Atmos to 1 US dollar. It seems like the Atmos is pretty bad.
Yeah, I know. That's what I thought. Is the exact same thing. So I was like, no, this is a bad. Don't convert to Atmos. You're going to lose a lot of money.
Maybe Atmos is different, though. Maybe it's like in Korea and 1,000 Atmos is like worth $1.
Maybe. We don't get too much into the currencies of Atmos.
At any rate, she's very excited to be reunited with her husband. She's already emptied her bank accounts getting ready for it. And it just so happens the Venetians are scheduled to come back tomorrow to pick up the money. So obviously Project Blue Book's like, hey, what if we came back tomorrow and met these aliens? And of course the woman's like, well, the alien said not to tell anybody and not to invite anyone over. But since you're from the Air Force, you probably would love to see their space machine. So sure, why not? Come over tomorrow.
Yeah, I like that. And they're like, yes, space machine.
we'll be back tomorrow.
Yeah. They're like, more cinnamon buns, please.
Anyway, we cut to the next day. The Venetians come by to pick up the cash. Sunglasses on, talking like robots. The boys from Project
Yeah, did we
Blue-
talk about how robotic they spoke? They do like the thing like if you're a kid being an alien, like, we are from Venus. We need your Atmos dollars. Like, that's how they talk.
Yeah, that's how Venetians speak.
It's hard learning English.
This woman, she's so funny. She's such an unreliable narrator. I believe when we first meet her and she starts telling the story, she's just like, she tells the Project Blue Book guy, she's like, they were from Venus. And they're like, how do you know? She's like, I don't. I just had a feeling in my heart that they were from Venus. And they cut to the flashback and the two guys are like, we are from Venus. I'm like, well, no, they told you. Anyway, none of that matters. They show up to get their $40,000. Project Blue Book steps out and kind of ambushes them and like...
It's like those, remember that old show where the guys were always meeting the young girls for sex? What was that show called?
What are you talking about?
You know that show, it was like that guy would always come out. It's like, it'd be like some, like a pervert pedophile would be like meeting a young girl and then the young girl's not there and instead that guy's there. To Catch a Predator, is that what it's called? It was like that, but with Venetians.
I thought you were talking about an old show like Dragnet.
No. I'm telling you, the show, they'd be like, how old did you think Cindy was? He's like, 16. Well, she told you she was 13. It's like that, but it's like, they said they were Venetians. Anyways.
Yeah, I hear you.
That's exactly what I'm saying. It's exactly the same.
Yes, what you're saying is they pop out to ambush them.
Yeah.
What I was really impressed by is these two guys never break character.
Right.
They never stop talking like robots. They never try to run away. They just like keep going.
So that's my point. But this is the last scene with them, right?
Yeah. Like Project Blue Book asks them how they got there, and they say ramjet, and then Project Blue Book explains how that doesn't work. How a ramjet doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and so the scene sort of ends with the two of them like looking at each other guiltily. But I'm like, but then that's it. And I was like, so.
Well, that's not true, because Gatlin called his old buddy, who now works for LAPD's bunko squad, and he's there to arrest them.
Yeah, they get arrested, but like, they don't really explain how this all happened. Like, I guess you could put the pieces together as a viewer, be like, they read a newspaper report and tried to take advantage of this woman, but they never really explain that.
You get it.
I don't know. It seems like it seemed like such a weird thing to end because you're right, because they never break character. So it's not like they're like, oh, shucks, you caught us. They're just like, no, we are aliens. I'm like, what? And then that was it. You never see them again.
Well, you get that monologue by the old lady at the end.
Do you?
Yeah, where she gives a big speech about how she may be gullible, but she's not stupid. And I'm like, no, you're stupid.
Yeah, I don't know. I still think they're aliens.
They never broke character, Jordan. They're going to take that all the way to court.
Yeah. They keep talking about Atmos and the currency exchange.
It was great. I really like this sequence. It was very fun.
It's so odd because it just felt like this was the whole episode, but it's just a small little part to like waste time. Like, doesn't this feel like this was a longer thing where there's like, the episode is about this woman getting scammed and they go through systematically to prove that these guys aren't aliens. At the very end, they find the guys and they are able to prove that it is a scam. But that's not what this is. It's just like a fun little, isn't it hilarious? These guys are pretending to be Venetians. Anyways, back to the episode. None of this matters to the rest of the plot or the other UFO.
Yeah. Just call your buddy at the bunko squad, Jordan.
Yeah.
What happened to bunko squads anyway?
I don't know. They went away by about 1983.
Where's all the bunko these days?
Yeah, bunkos. That's great.
All right, Jordan. Well, we'll get to the second half of this episode, which is where the Project Blue Book boys, they are giving a speech at a space symposium or something. They're like in front of a big crowd of people.
Yeah.
And had the funniest moment of the entire episode to me. In an episode that's already been pretty funny with these Venetians. Mm-hmm. In that we get this wide shot. Major Gatlin is talking in front of this group of people. And he looks out there and he says, "You, sir, What's your question, young man? And then we cut, and an old man in a beard stands up and asks a question. And I was just like, what was happening here?
I don't remember that.
He's just like, it's a wide shot, and he's just like, what's your question, young man? And then we cut to a close-up of the man asking the question. It's just like a 45-year-old man with the biggest beard I've ever seen.
Yeah, the lights were dim.
He couldn't tell. At any rate, this is the agent. He and the screenwriter have come to tell them about the UFO encounter they had, and they're basically invited to drop by his house the next day, and they're gonna get the two women they're sexually harassing at the office to come out and tell the story too. And they all kind of meet up and sort of tell the story of the time they were at the bar on the Matterhorn and this weird alien came.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And of course, these guys are like, well, we take these stuff seriously. We're going to look into it. We're going to go up to the Matterhorn, try to talk to that bartender, see if we can get any more evidence, that kind of thing. And for some reason that makes no sense to me, the screenwriter's like, okay, well, I'll come with you up the Matterhorn, which is a bad idea, mostly because he's a terrible actor, and we'd have to watch him like stumble through another scene.
It is funny. I've noticed in a few of these episodes, up to the point where we are now, a few of the actors, it's just like, have these people ever acted before? Like, is this just like a friend of someone? Because there's some brutal actors in it. I remember I can't remember. I think it was someone's wife in one of the other episodes. But I was like, oh, she's terrible. And yeah, he's also not a good performer.
I thought for sure they're just like, gotta get out of this scene as fast as we can with him. He's not holding it together. And they're like, let's come with us to the next scene too. I'm like, what? Why?
He's like someone's brother or something.
Anyway, the bartender reluctantly confirms the UFO encounter. He doesn't like it. He'll never admit to it again. But
he's really cagey, right?
He doesn't want to. He can't lose this job, Jordan.
Yeah. There's sweet benefits at the Matterhorn.
They look around. There's no real good evidence there, like some scratched on the ground and like some melted snow, but nothing very conclusive. But they find out there was another witness, the gondola operator. But after that night, he never came back to work. And they travel out to his house in L.A., and the landlord's just like, well, as soon as he came back from that night, he got on his bike, and he took off, and he moved out to Santa Barbara. And man, oh man, he fell off the wagon hard that night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And of course, Major Gatlin and old Harry Fitz are like, well, let's head out to Santa Barbara. And we get a scene of them traveling down the highway on their way to Santa Barbara. And as they're driving, the most insane thing happens. Gatlin opens the newspaper, sees an article in the paper that says the agent and the screenwriter have told the press about their alien encounter. And Gatlin's like, stop this car. We're going back to L.A. And Fritz is like, but we're almost in Santa Barbara. He's like, no, back to L.A.
Yeah, and just as a side thing, I do like because they're going to approach these guys and find out, and they're like, yeah, we are writing a script. I was just like, how fast did this happen? That they're like, they say they have a story, and someone's like, deal, you're making a movie. I'm like, I get it's in the world of this episode. I was like, I don't think it's going to be this fast, guys.
Dude, it's so fast that the story in the paper is that screenwriter agent saw alien. They turn back to L.A., drive to the agent's office. He's not there. So they pick up a copy of the Variety of that day.
That's right.
And inside Variety is someone's highlighted an article in it that says they've already sold the screenplay to a studio. At which point they're like, go to the assistants, and they're like, tell us where they are right now. They find them at like a studio. Yeah. They're just like having lunch. And the screenwriter and the agent are just like, they're just like so like innocent. They're like, what do you mean? Why are you?
Yeah, they're so blasé about it. Yeah,
they're like, well, you said in Variety that we confirmed your sighting. They're like, well, you basically did. You didn't say it wasn't true.
Yeah, that's the funny. That's what they're angry because they don't want Project Blue Book to be like diminished in any way because this could be a hoax. And then the whole thing is like, did they just say this? Are they just making this up for a story so they can get a movie made? Is what Project Blue Book starts thinking.
Yeah, exactly. And the agent and screenplay are just like, we don't know. We thought you said it was real.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, so Gatlin and Fitz get back in their car, drive back to Santa Barbara.
There was no other way you could do it, Luke.
And I will say, they meet this gondola operator who is giving this role his all. Like, it's actually like a sad scene. This man has one scene, and he's like way better than the screenwriter. It's like this scene of a man who's fallen off the wagon after trying to get like sober for years and just like had this horrible encounter, and it's freaked him out so badly, and he can't get like he can't stay sober again now. And it's a very sad scene, but it doesn't really go anywhere.
No, it's just basically like the trauma he has experienced by seeing this UFO. That's basically what it is. And he does essentially confirm their story, though, is right. It's like they're in the ship kind of lands on top of the what's it called, the Matterhorn.
Yes, on the bar on the Matterhorn.
Yeah, and then basically everyone gets into the cable car thing, and they're sort of like nothing really happens other than like I think the power goes out at one point, and they're like shook around a little bit. But he actually sees, he sees the ship there and everything, and that's what was so traumatizing to him.
Yeah, but it's no new information, with the sole exception of right at the end of his story, he mentions an indigenous reservation at the bottom of the mountainside. And for no apparent reason, Project Blue Book then just drives to this reservation, talks to a guy there who's just like, yeah, I don't know, our ancient relatives said that there were lights up there 1,000 years ago or something. Well, okay. I'm like, what is this scene?
Well, basically, yeah, this guy who was the conductor or whatever you called him, he basically said there's a reservation at the bottom of the hill, and they will also confirm what I've seen. They would have had to, because it was right where they were. So that's why they go down. But then it's just like, yeah, they're like, yeah, I don't know, maybe we saw something, but
you know, ancient wisdom says. I'm like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, not great.
Anyway, the episode ends with Project Blue Book going back to see the agent and the screenwriter one last time for some reason. Basically, they're there to tell them all the evidence, per usual, is inconclusive, and they'll be filing this one as another true unknown.
And then the writer is just like, I don't even want to make this movie. And his agent's like, What do you mean you're not making the movie? Like, we're so far into production for some reason. And then he's like, you know how fast this movie industry works? As soon as we set our story, we're into production. And then he's like, no, you're already changing my script and adding stuff, and if I can't tell the story as it is, forget it. And I was like, wow, this agent should drop this guy.
I mean, the studio wants to add bikini aliens to it, and he's not into it.
You say yes, absolutely. Let's get this thing made.
Well, the screenwriter says if he ever gets to make it his way, he'll get technical advisor roles for Gatlin and Fitz, so it all ends well.
Do you think that was added by that retired sergeant, whoever it is, who's the consultant on the show? He's like, add that in.
Yeah, remember when you gave me a technical advisor role? Put that in it. That's the technical advising he gave Jordan, Hollywood technical advice.
That's right. And so they go through at the end and we're like, oh, the reason there was melted snow was because of this, and the reason the window broke was because of this. But at the end, they're all just like, it's all circumstantial.
Another true unknown, Jordan.
Another true unknown. And you're like, there you go. Episode done.
All right, John, you have any final notes on these episodes?
No, but I do feel like, because we're now 8 episodes into the show, I feel like it's hit its groove, for better or worse. Like, I think the show is what it is. Would you agree with me?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we watched 1, we watched 6, then we watched 7, and now 8. And I feel like it's definitely in its groove. I think, to its detriment, I think the second episode we watched of the show, where there was the husband and wife and her father, like, and the father-in-law kind of manipulating their lives, had more of a story, whereas these two felt more like the pilot, where they just kind of like look at evidence, debunk evidence, and there's no real characters involved.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because that episode, I don't know which one that was, 2 or 6 or something, that was my favorite episode of the show so far. It actually felt like we met characters, they had like real lives and real stories, and there was a point to it. A lot of these are just like, everyone are just chess pieces, but like not even particularly interesting chess pieces.
Just teens, people who hate teens, and a couple of rummies.
Yeah, they're all just like 2-dimensional characters. It's like hobos, rummies, teens, the evil dean. It's just like, okay, sure.
Well, Jordan, what do you want to rate Sighting 407, the Forest City incident?
Okay, because the show is, I feel like, not pulling its weight as much as I am as a viewer, I'm only going to give it a 5.5. It's starting to drop.
Fair enough. I mean, it's not a great episode. It's pretty bare bones, and the entire premise is teens, aren't they liars?
You know what? That's a good point you make. Bare bones is a very good way to describe this. It almost feels like there's not enough content and information and evidence to carry a full episode. And they somehow do it. Like, there's a lot of conversations, but you're right. It's so bare bones. You're like, you could go, the kids see a UFO. Anything happen? Nope. End of episode. You're like, okay.
Yep, that's all. Unknown.
That's it.
Unsolved.
Yeah.
I think I'm still had like an okay time. I think you pointed out earlier, the UFOs uniformly are great episode to episode.
Yeah,
Those are always nice.
yeah.
I had a couple of laughs. I really like the guy's monologue about why he took the fake photos that ended in "I love kids." That made me laugh really hard. But I'm only going to give this one. I think I'm going to give it a 3.
Ooh, pretty low.
And then, of course, there's Sighting 4008 rather, the Desert Spring incident.
Oh, for whatever reason, I like this one a little bit better. I like the Venetian guys. I thought, for whatever reason, I just thought that was a little bit more interesting episode. I'll give it a 6.
I agree. I think this is better. I think if this show's just going to be bare bones like this, at least what it did is told 2 separate stories. One was just a weird comedy about Venetians trying to bunko this woman. Who knows why?
Yeah. Yeah, there was no time. There was no possible time to explain any of that. They're just like, that was just 15 minutes of your time, guys.
I kept waiting for it to be revealed the husband put them up to it, but they never broke character because they're that good at their job.
They're that good scam artists.
And then the UFO incident on the top of the mountain was really good. Like, it was a great miniature work, very cool as it happened.
Agreed, yeah.
There's a lot to like about that sequence. And I think the strength of it was, if these shows are going to be so bare-boned, at least do, like, 2 just bare-bone stories back-to-back. So at least I was just, like, watching 2 half hours of something.
But wouldn't it be nice if you, and I mean, this would get old too, but don't you think it'd be nice if there was 2 plot lines that connected in some way of 2 possible sightings that maybe are the same sighting from 2 different viewpoints, and they have to kind of figure out if they're connected or not, if it's the same sighting or not, and then maybe you find one is real and one's not, or something to that effect, as opposed to just like 2 random things. Because I was like,
yes, but that's the
I don't
teen
know.
one. There's like
Yeah,
the guy
I
with
guess
the
that's
photos, like, and that wasn't very much fun.
yeah, you're right.
I mean, the pilot was like that too. There was like 4 people who saw the same UFO, and that wasn't any better.
I don't know why I'm trying to fix this show. It is what it is.
I'm gonna give this one a 5 though. I did enjoy it a lot more.
Yeah, a lot more. 5 out of 10.
5 out of 10. It was a fine diversion for a few minutes.
Yeah, fair enough.
But yeah, so not a great outing. I don't think the show's getting better.
But is it fair to say I think we are going on season 2 now, right?
Yeah, we've finished our 3 of season 1, so we're gonna go into season 2. So we'll see if it changes over the course of like that year break between season 1 and season 2.
Mm-hmm. As they sit down, it's the summer break. They finished a season, like success. We really nailed it, and they're like, let's fine tune it for season 2. I'm gonna assume they're not gonna change the basic formula of this show.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it, Jordan.
Yeah, it's a little bit broken.
Well, Jordan, before we finish up the episode, though, we had quite the listener response to Ghost Watch.
Oh, did we?
People really enjoyed us watching Ghost Watch. I think it's obviously lives on in people's memories. So we've got a few people reached out to us about it. One of them was a listener named Drew, who he actually recommended. Do you remember Ultraviolet?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, he recommended that originally. He wrote a nice email just talking about how I think we had sort of talked about. It seemed like this would have really lived on in our minds had we seen it as kids. And he'd seen it when he was 11 years old and was just talked about how effective that like faux broadcast worked with like people you knew from TV and like how scary it was. Like apparently he and his brother like still quote the show to this day. He even said a hilarious screen grab of a group chat with his friends in which someone had posted a link because this was the 30th anniversary of Ghostwatch, it turns out, and they had done a live immersive experience of Ghostwatch. You could go and be like freaked out by pipes in person, and everyone in the group chat's just like, fuck no, too scary, no way. Like,
you know what? It is nice to hear that because it was a very effective. It's funny talking about that and this show. They really nailed that what they were going for, the format of this magazine style show. It was really, really well done.
Yeah. So it really points out that people who saw it, it freaked them out good. To this day, they're still freaked out. We even had a couple former guests write in. Phil Nichols, our Bradbury scholar, who we did Martian Chronicles with, he wrote in and he was saying like, just confirming what we were talking about, just like those news personalities were so well known, like from a variety of angles. Like one like was on Top of the Pops, one had a kid show. Obviously, this star Michael Parkinson was a big news guy, so like it was very effective. People were tuning in and were like 100% were like, well, we know these people as news people, so apparently it was like they really hit the public pretty hard that way. And then of course our guest Joe from Freaky Links and Earth 2. She sent a message on one of our Instagram posts where she's just like, I watched this movie a couple years ago, and she says, as I was watching it, it unlocked some traumatic memories for me that apparently she watched it with her grandmother when she was 6 years old, and she didn't remember it until she started watching it again.
Oh, that's funny. I think at 6, I'd have been too young for it. It would have freaked me out.
Yeah, it was buried deep in her mind, so when she watched it again 2 years ago, it all came flooding back. It shows she'd totally forgotten.
Well, I'm glad we could have done that for her.
Yeah, so I enjoyed reading all the Ghostwatch stuff because it clearly was traumatic for a lot of people.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to get a lot of too much people writing about their trauma from Project U.F.O, though.
No, I don't think so. Well, as we get to the close here, we just want to remind everybody, this year we're doing bonus episodes for charity. So, if you want to see ranchers get attacked by aliens in a Howard Crossing incident, that's an episode of this show we've already skipped past, you can donate. $50 is what we're suggesting, but give to what your means are. You can go to our website. It's continuumdrag.podbean.com, or just go to our social media. There'll be links there. We've got a list of charities suggested by former guests. You give a little donation to one of these charities. Tell us which episode of a show we've skipped past you want us to watch, and we'll do a little bonus episode for you. You can find all that on the website.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a bonus episode about Project U.F.O. It could be anything we've seen.
But it could be Project U.F.O.
It could be. I would request it's not Project U.F.O.
What about that super train, a very formal heist?
Yeah, I'd like to watch that. I want to see Jamie Farr in a heist episode on a super train. That sounds better.
And then, of course, you can email us at continuumdrag@gmail.com if you have any comments on anything we're doing. We'd love to hear from you guys. And girls.
And
gals?
And
what's the right nomenclature?
We like hearing about it, and then Luke will tell me after.
Yeah. Jordan will get a message later. He'll find out about it somehow.
Yeah, I'm busy.
And, of course, on Instagram and Twitter, we will have clips from Project U.F.O. Lots of good UFO work. Mm-hmm. Mostly UFO work.
Well, and we've said that, but again, if there's one real strength to the show, it's the art team, because they're nailing it on the UFOs. They look great.
100%. It's almost a shame we're watching these like low-res versions of it.
Agreed, yeah.
And you can find us at Continuum Drag on Instagram, Twitter, and Jordan, because Instagram forced me to move over to a new platform to schedule our posts, we have a Facebook page now too, so you can find us on Facebook apparently.
Hey, look at that.
We're everywhere.
Yeah, and Facebook. Does anyone have Facebook? Isn't it just like mom sharing like right-wing like minion memes?
Yeah, your mom won't stop posting them on our site.
I haven't been on Facebook in a while. But yes, we're on Facebook.
But that about wraps it up. So listener, thank you for joining us, and Jordan, I'll see you next week.
I'll see you then.
Continuum Drag is recorded in Toronto, Ontario, and Seoul, South Korea. Theme music by James Rick Seidler. Produced by Jordan Delick and Luke Black. Special thanks to Aaron Yunes.